Gentleman from Colonial Heights, Mr. Cox.
Mr. Speaker, point of personal privilege.
Gentleman has the floor.
Mr. Speaker, first of all, I want to talk a little bit about today. I think we all know why we're here, but I want to do a little bit of history to remind you. So the steps we've gone through to get here today, we promised way back in March that we would have a special session debate Medicaid expansion. And I just want to make sure that you sort of understand the chronology of what we basically said we would do. Listen to the words very carefully. March 4th, 2014, Speaker Howe at a press conference said we should hold a special session to debate the issue of Obamacare's Medicaid expansion on its merits. We made the point that would allow us to pass a budget. It would also allow the proponents, which they're doing today, to basically debate their plan. March 5th, 2014, Speaker Howe in a letter to Governor McAuliffe, we should hold a special session to allow proponents of Medicaid expansion, including Governor McAuliffe, to craft a substantive, detailed piece of legislation that can stand alone and be considered on its merits. For months, we have said we were committed to a full and fair debate. June 13th, 2014, House Republican leadership, the House of Delegates is committed to a full and fair discussion of Medicaid expansion. July 9th, 2014, Speaker Howe, I strongly believe that Virginians deserve a full and fair debate on the issue, which while I call the House back into session in September. September 16th, 2014, Speaker Howe, throughout the budget stalemate, I, along with other House Republican leaders, promised to hold a full and fair debate on Medicaid expansion during a separate special session after the budget was passed. So here we are. Today is our full and fair debate. And I want to make the first point is we fulfilled the promise we made way back in March. You know, I've heard a lot from the other side of the aisle when you read the clippings, where's your plan? This is a charade. You're wasting taxpayers' dollars. But let me address that in two or three ways. Number one, today we're going to deal with, I think, a very significant budget issue. We're going to send a message to the bond rating agencies that we deal with our problems, unlike Washington, right away. We're going to have a plan that was a bipartisan plan, so, of course, that's a big deal. We're also going to do judges today, and I don't think there's probably a more fundamental constitutional requirement than that. But we're also here to debate Medicaid expansion. But let me tell you also why we're here. We're here because of the other side of the aisle. If they had not embedded Medicaid expansion improperly into the budget, we'd have never been in special session to start with. Don't forget, I stood on this floor at the end of the regular session and asked to have the regular session extended so we could finish the budget. But no. That was rejected. And, of course, Governor McAuliffe called us in a special session. Remember, we waited weeks and weeks and weeks for anything to happen so we could basically have public hearings. And so what's the cost of those special sessions? $130,901.68. And so if we would have decoupled like we asked right away, we could have had this session without all of that expense. And the other thing that's interesting today is I think you'll probably find out that we won't see any Democratic bills filed on the floor today. But I do want to address where's your plan? You know, it's interesting. That's sort of like me asking the other side of the aisle, where's your plan to repeal Obamacare? Or where's your plan to repeal the EPA or implement school choice? We've been pretty clear on this floor. We're not for Medicaid expansion. You know, we've talked about reform. We've talked about other things. We've given multiple floor speeches. We've given press conferences. We've given op-eds and newsletters. We've been pretty clear, and once again, I'm going to repeat some of the points, for a lot of good reasons. Number one, Medicaid is broken, 1,600% growth over the last 30 years, and consumes 30% of all new revenue. And we've constantly said, and I think we believe strongly, you can't count on Washington. And how many examples do you have to give? Like your plan, like your doctor? Don't trust Washington promises. $17 trillion in debt, sequestration, the Federal Highway Trust Fund, which is running on empty, and Governor McAuliffe's own speeches, where he says we've got to diversify this economy and we cannot count on basically the entitlement mentality of the federal government. And he's right. But our opposition is more fundamental. I stood up about 2 or 3 months ago, and I really mean this. There's just a philosophical difference. And I don't think it is that we want to do better for Virginians or you want to do better for Virginians. I think we both feel strongly we're right. But our problem is that sort of the panacea or the vision that you set up for Medicaid expansion is just not historically or what we deal with in real life reality. It just doesn't happen that way. I mean, if you look at currently, you have 1/3 of doctors don't accept Medicaid patients. The Times-Dispatch had a great editorial the other day that said a new study at 25 states that have expanded Medicaid shows emergency room usage is actually up. And obviously, that same study shows that new Medicaid expansion population is sicker than originally expected. I've not seen any definitive proof that Medicaid expansion actually improves the actual health care outcome of patients, and that's what we're all after. And, and it's just ironic. If you look at those states that have taken those waivers, they've gotten almost none of them. They can't build those plans, basically, that you say they can build. And so I will say this. If you look historically, it just has never panned out. Government programs meant to lift people out of poverty simply haven't worked. As I've said many times, nearly 50 years after we declare war on poverty, things are getting worse, not better. There are more than, and I think it's a staggering figure, 46 million Americans living in poverty today, the largest number in 54 years. 1 in 5 American households on food stamps and 1 in 8 Virginians on Medicaid. And second, nearly every entitlement program makes promises. We're going to have X cost. It's going to grow only X percent, and it never happens. I don't mean it just never happens. And let's just cite Medicaid. First year, cost estimate, $238 million. The actual first year cost is over $1 billion. And here's the thing we got to look at. With the growth of Medicaid, we talk about people, we talk about our citizens, and I think we both want to do what's right for all citizens. But the reality is, if you keep funding a program, and you expand a program that's growing like that, you're going to have to cut K-12, you're going to have to cut higher ed, you're going to have to cut public safety. Those very citizens we talk about are going to suffer because basically it's going to consume so much of our budget, we're not going to be able to do right by them. So I want to conclude. We're going to do today exactly what we promised. And what we promised was we would come here and give a fair opportunity to debate an issue you feel very passionately about. But I think we've been very clear where we're on that issue. I think the people expect that, to keep promises. So that's what this session is about. Thank you, Mr. Speaker.